Same old cardboard messiahs. AOC, Bernie Sanders, and now Zohran Mamdani. The mayoral election in New York City, coming up in some 80 days, is like no other and is changing politics in the Big Apple forever.
I'm pregnant with Cuomo's baby! I'm pregnant with Cuomo's baby!
To make sense of it all, I got to speak with Emanuel Pastreich. Pastreich serves as the president of the Asia Institute, speaks Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, and has authored several books.
Pleasure to be with you again, Ian, and I appreciate your holding down the fort there in New York City, the front line, ground zero.
You're like Zohran Mamdani and
Yes.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders. What do you think about these figures?
Right. Well, these three figures, of course, Bernie Sanders is in Vermont, not in New York proper, but he is a New York figure. And the three of them have been built up as the progressives, right? The ones who those in the progressive tradition of America, of reform, of a more open, more accountable, more transparent, more diverse society. These are the three figures who are supposed to be leading us. But we have been, as Americans, betrayed by them over and over again. And they really are so deeply deceptive in their rhetoric, in their posturing, in their approach to politics and their relationship with the far right, that I really want to say, without being able to drag out the classified documents or Homeland Security directives, that they really operate as agents, and that there's a complete, absolute break between people like Dennis Kucinich, who I worked with and I met in the old days, who drafted the articles of impeachment for George W. Bush, who ran for president, and I worked on his campaign with David Swanson, him and others, including Ron Paul at the time, who are actually committed to transparent governance, to trying to restore some sort of rule of law in the United States, that they are these three characters: Bernie Sanders, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Zohran Mamdani, are in a different class. They really are what I would call cardboard messiahs. They are fake in the most profound sense. And I wanted, since we both have some experience interacting, well, if not directly with them, indirectly with them, to talk about what specifically, why they're fake and why them, as these progressive, reformist, forward sort of leaning people, that their betrayal in a way is even more fatal than someone like Donald Trump, who really is what he pretends. He doesn't pretend to be anybody. You look at his face and you know what you're dealing with. His narcissism, his indulgence, his greed, his self-indulgence is there for you to see. Donald Trump really is what he doesn't pretend to be something else. You can see right through him. But these three characters, I feel, are deceptive in a profound way. Comes up for these progressives, especially with Zohran Mamdani, was his position during the COVID reign of terror. And he was falling all over himself to lock people down, to force vaccines upon them, and to give it a sort of multicultural, inclusive flavor. And this, he was basically aligned with Bernie Sanders, who also took that position, which was that the minorities, poor people, were being treated badly because they did not have access to vaccines and masks, and that our hearts, we're not being sufficiently considerate, like we should be as Americans, to have a more egalitarian society. We're favoring the rich by denying these COVID-19 vaccines to minority people. Now, it's a fact, which has now been disclosed through follow-up research, that Palantir in these minority neighborhoods was intentionally targeting minorities and poor people for vaccines. That was their tracking and tracing, was specifically to force minorities first and foremost to take these experimental dangerous vaccines, following exactly on the traditions from before, as we saw with experimentation with venereal disease on African Americans and other experiments back to Native Americans and other minorities in the 19th and 20th centuries. So this was par for the course, i.e. someone, Zohran Mamdani, posing as a progressive, a minority, inclusive, but following in the most disgusting aspect of American tradition, which is the intentional targeting of minorities for the use of experimental drugs.
Yeah. I wonder how he got pulled along into it so easily. And
well, we may not have access to all these files yet, but what do you think?
You know, it could be just naivety on his part. He must have a lot on his plate. He has apparently a very busy mom who's involved in the filmmaking business, a father who's a professor at Columbia University, and he's only been an American citizen, I was told, I might be wrong, but for 10 years. So he may have more on his plate than having had the time to study the free society.
I feel more critical on the issue of COVID-19, as you know. I mean, for me, it was a central issue. It was actually one of the reasons I was banned in the Green Party as a candidate, now that the emails have been revealed, which I'd be happy to share, in which I was attacked as a COVID-19 vaccine conspiracy theorist. And this was used as a reason to block me from being a member of the Green Party in Massachusetts and to block me from addressing the Green Party, even though I was one of only 2 candidates for president. So the fact that this progressive sort of embraced the worst. I mean, this is what we had. I mean, I ran into this with many friends in New York and Boston, and which we saw in Florida, right? Because many people go between Florida and New York or Boston, right? Florida under DeSantis was freer, right? They were not engaged in this fascistic lockdowns, and they were not, tracking people down and punishing them left and right for not taking multiple vaccines for COVID-19. And so this is extremely disturbing. It's extremely disturbing. And the fact that Mamdani is a minority, the fact that he calls out Gaza as a crime, the fact that he backs all these minority concerns and he's concerned about working people, this is all great. I have nothing against this. But the Democratic Party backed to the hilt in a way going even beyond the Republican Party, the whole COVID-19 reign of terror, which has left hundreds of millions of people dead. Well, we don't know the numbers, but let's say many millions of people around the world. So it's the equivalent to the Second World War, or it will be the equivalent to the Second World War in terms of number of deaths. So it trumps everything else. Well, this was a pattern that we saw. And as I brought up in my recent article on Bernie Sanders, and for that matter, the topic that I was thinking about today, which was the recent article by Caitlin Johnstone attacking Bernie Sanders for not calling Gaza a genocide when the MAGA sort of right-wing figure Marjorie Taylor Greene did. This falls into this pattern of a sort of a bait and switch, or shall we say, a baited gambit, in which we're given these progressives who hold up that they're for the working people, that they are for higher wages, for more transparency, et cetera, but they buy into these state crimes on a massive scale. And we're given the alternative that we're faced with are these people like Donald Trump or DeSantis, for that matter, or others who are, basically supporting corporate rule of the entire government, the destruction of the Constitution, replacement of everything by investment banks and now by AI, without exceptions, without any rule of law, without a follow-up, and plus private prisons, detention, and concentration camps, etc. They were willing to say that they had doubts about masks, doubts about COVID-19, doubts about vaccines, doubts about 9/11, doubts about the Federal Reserve, doubts about the globalist agenda going on, which were things that these so-called progressives, like Bernie Sanders, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and like your good friend Zohran Mamdani, are silent as the grave about, and that is the essential paradox. And I think it's not accidental. I think it's a setup.
I didn't hear a word from him talk about myocarditis or having any doubts about, and we're going to put on, let's take a look at some of the posters. You shared these. They're really incredible in multiple languages with Zohran's
very
big
multicultural
mug. Yeah. However, Zohran hasn't been afraid to throw down the gauntlet. In very clear terms, he said that he would have Benjamin Netanyahu arrested and would follow the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant, which I think is an Interpol arrest warrant, which may also include Yoav Gallant, possibly, I think. And that's quite a remarkable statement coming from someone who wants to be mayor in New York City. So it's not like he's afraid of controversy.
Right. Well, I don't want to say that Zohran Mamdani is worse than Donald Trump or worse than DeSantis. I'm just saying that he's deeply compromised, and that in some ways I'm less interested in him or Bernie Sanders as an individual. I mean, I'm not interested in them as what their family's life is or how they are as individuals in terms of what they actually are doing. And I feel that the way in which they participate in this intentional baited gambit, where we, the citizens, are given this impossible choice between one group that gives us some things that we need, but forces us to buy it, the right way, right? Some things that are appropriate on COVID-19, on Federal Reserve, on federal income tax, for that matter, on to 9/11 to some degree, some groups, and other issues. But it's tied to militarism, it's tied to corporate rule, and it's tied to a radical destruction of basically all government services. The only government left is the military, basically. And on the other hand, our friends Zohran Mamdani, AOL, and Bernie Sanders, who give us some good things. And I personally agree that Netanyahu certainly deserves to be arrested. I'm just not sure whether sort of making him the center of attention is the ultimate answer. It's a good statement. I'm not opposed to making a strong statement like that in accord with the International Court. I wonder what exactly is going on here? How are we as citizens being tricked by this sort of halfway progressives? I mean, you don't really believe he's going to arrest Netanyahu, do you?
No. As mayor, New York City would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. This is a city that our values are in line with international law. It's time that our actions are also.
Even though the US is not a signatory to the ICC?
No, it's time that we actually step up and make clear what we are willing to do to showcase the leadership that is sorely missing in the federal administration.
And I think even Trump has said something to the effect that Mamdani himself could be arrested for even trying to do something like that because of the diplomatic immunity that is given to political leaders in New York City. However, Mamdani could potentially close the access to the 5 boroughs. So it wouldn't be an arrest, but he might be able to stop access. But it does seem very unlikely. However, Mamdani has, like I said, spoken very carefully about it and said that they would stand up to Washington, which is lacking in leadership in this issue.
Well, I certainly welcome. I mean, that would. I mean, if he's speaking at that level, then obviously, and I don't pretend to follow the day-to-day of what's happening in New York politics, New York City politics. But if that's true, if he's moving in that direction with that sort of solidity and determination, then he's certainly going beyond Bernie Sanders or AOC into new territory. And there is some positive aspects to that, I would say. The United States is facing institutional collapse and political confrontation that we certainly haven't seen in our lifetime, and some would say we haven't seen since the 1850s. So it's quite serious. And the issue of Israel, I mean, the Israel-United States-Israel, the Israel-United States issue could very well be the fracture point, fracturing on both the left and the right, right? I mean, you have in the right wing, the conservatives. I hate to use these terms, but they are helpful for us to grasp the basic contours of American political culture. The right is fracturing with a large number, increasingly hostile to Israel, and the sort of fundamentalist evangelical Christians having more and more trouble justifying their attachment to a state of Israel, which is clearly not run by Jesus. And on the other side, on the left, we also see increasingly Israel has lost all the sort of leftist socialist legitimacy that it had in the 70s with the kibbutz and all the sort of shared living, egalitarianism that is now hard to imagine in Israel today, but it was once quite powerful on the left. And many leftists, Jewish leftists, no longer feel any need to defend Israel. So that split is quite serious. However, it's Israel's, and I would even say there within the sort of military intelligence community, there's also splits on this, and that the big threat for Israel from Iran is not that Iran is going to attack Israel, although that's obviously it can do. It's shown. The biggest threat to Israel is that people in the Pentagon are going to start thinking about the 1970s nostalgically and think maybe we shouldn't just be invested in Israel. Maybe Iran can play a strategic role for the United States like it used to be. And that was good for the United States, not to be dependent entirely on Israel, but to have Iran as a solid part of the American equation in the Middle East. And although this is verboten language in think tanks in Washington, D.C., I think it would be not just speculation to say that there's serious consideration of that in the United States and that that's what Israel is most afraid of.
And even I wouldn't have said it myself, but now that people like Jon Stewart have come forward, and unless it's an AI video, it didn't look AI. Oh, that sounds like an unusual thing to say.
Right.
It didn't look like an AI video, but Jon Stewart said something to the effect that these right-wing Israeli neocons are going to get Israel destroyed.
No, yeah. Well, this is a complicated equation, and maybe it's beyond the scope of this one meeting discussion today. But the question of whether United States is a dog being wagged by Israel, or whether Israel is being used by the United States or players in the United States as its mercenary to do its dirty work, this is not an easy question to answer. I would say they're both true at the same time, and there's a sort of a invisible to the naked eye overlap between the Israeli and the American military-industrial complex, but also in IT development, and finance. So the United States and Israel are so merged at multiple invisible levels, sort of beneath the skin, the surface, that it's very, very hard to just say, oh, we don't like Israel, we're going to break with Israel, because that's like, taking a machete and cutting up the U.S. itself. So the split it's entirely possible that you'll have a split, but it's not going to be pretty. It's going to involve, tearing up the guts of the entire American political system, political, economic, and defense and technology system, because the invisible sort of connections between Israel and the United States are so deep. It almost reminds me, maybe not as serious, but the problem we had with the Algerian independence in the 1950s in France, in which France was able to pull out of Vietnam pretty easily. But it had enormous problems in Algeria because so many French went to Algeria, bought land, invested, had their businesses there. And so it was so deeply enmeshed that for France to pull out of Algeria was a much more bloody and unpleasant, catastrophic, even domestically, within France. And what we may be looking at with the United States when the Israel issue actually starts to sort of bubble up to the surface is going to be something truly catastrophic in the United States. It's not like the United States is in a position to say, oh, Israel's over there, we had this little deal with them, it's over now. No, the Israel is like inside of us. It's inside of the United States itself.
You mentioned France, and it appears Macron a week ago said that France in September at the United Nations will recognize Palestine as a second state. We also heard a similar comment from Canada.
Right.
And then the UK had a kind of nuanced one that if Israel behaved, and that perhaps the UK wouldn't insist on a second state, but if Israel just kept on with the war, then maybe there would be a second state. Did you get those kind of reports in Japan?
Right. Well, I saw what you saw, and I was scratching my head trying to figure out what exactly this meant. And it's, I think, not so easy to interpret. It could be that these politicians are responding to the specifics of a catastrophic situation in which they want to distance themselves from being somehow associated with this slaughter, intentional slaughter taking place in Gaza and Palestine, and that these pronouncements, and maybe the actual step, which is entirely possible that France would make such a proposal, that this will help them politically. But But France is a increasingly totalitarian state. We saw that over the last 5 years, the way in which the various, from the Yellow Jackets on, the efforts to use the police, domestication of intelligence and anti-terrorism, the crackdowns throughout France. France is looking more and more like Israel. So I'm not sure that the ritual of Macron saying something like this convinces me that, France is, back to liberté, égalité, fraternité. I mean, that there is, there's something else going on in Israel, and that it's above the nation state. It's not really about Israel nation state. Gaza and Israel is the sort of the laboratory, as Lowerman, Anthony Lowerman, I guess it is, like Lauenstein, this book, The Palestine Laboratory. Gaza and the attack on Gaza is being dragged out forever. I mean, it just goes on and on. And the question is, what is actually going on with the attack on the Palestinians and on Gaza specifically, but the West Bank now as well? And the answer that Lowenstein in that book, The Palestine Laboratory, is that Palestine, Gaza, is being used for experimentation, for developing new forms of social control, new drones, new cameras, new surveillance systems, new ways of killing people, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's being dragged out because Gaza is not just a tragedy, not just a genocide. It is a saleable commodity, that what's developed in Gaza can be and is being sold to countries around the world, not just the US, Russia, China, India, Germany, but it's also being sold to your local supermarket. It's being sold to corporations and companies, specifically, most centrally, Oracle and Palantir, but also Google, MITRE, Amazon, what are the other ones I'm blanking out on? Meta, OpenAI. These companies are deeply involved in the Israeli experiment. So Israel is not simply about a particular country which is being bad. It is part of an effort for total social and political and economic control of the world by a very wealthy class of people. And that problem is not about Jews or Israel at all. It's about the results of the massive, massive concentration of wealth over the last 20 years.
Wow. And Emanuel, you bring to the table the bigger overview about how some of these companies you've mentioned, Oracle, Google, Meta, Palantir, how they get so involved with government that they usurp government roles. And
Absolutely.
We find our essential services and role of our whole country being run by these corporations rather than the country itself.
Well, that is the Palestine experience in a way, right? It's the end of government. And now in the modified version, which is being promoted by Peter Thiel and other sort of these, Elon Musk for that matter, in his own way, based upon their prophet, Curtis Yarvin, with his book Patchwork, in which he suggests that the entire world, we don't need nations anymore or constitutions. We can just run the entire world by different multinational corporations with different skill sets for different regions or different functions. And so it's the end of any sort of democratic process, the end of any constitution, of any nations. And you have rights, as long as you keep paying your monthly Google fee. I mean, it's something like that. And so Google, I mean, for that effort to sort of rule by AI as it's the new form, but rule by IT, or what Sheldon Wolin from Princeton said, inverted totalitarianism, i.e. controlling daily processes in an absolute undemocratic way, as a way of creating a undemocratic system. So you have no choice to start with, back in whatever 1996 or whatever, with Windows. There's only one. You can't negotiate. There's nothing democratic, and that moved on to Explorer, to Google, to Facebook, to whatever, Instagram, etc. So you can participate in these organizations. They run your life. They control an increasing amount of all your experiences, but you have no right to tell how it should be run. You can sign a contract by saying yes, or you can get nothing at all. There's no process there, and that process, what we started from Windows at the beginning, through Google, through Facebook, is now on the verge of taking over the entire system of government in the United States and the world.
All right. Isn't AOC going to save us? What do you have to say about her?
Right. Well, as I sent you in the paper, the news recently, so there was an article in Israel about how she got started and was promoted by 2 Israeli startup companies, and the story about her being working class and is not entirely accurate. And that part, the way in which she made her money and got famous from these promotion by these 2 Israeli startup companies, is intentionally left out of her biography.
What are the bigger issues and the problem with what she actually does with the power?
Right. Well, as I said, there's this pattern, right, in which the so-called conservatives are allowed to address certain crimes and certain corruption, but they have to link it to certain racist and militarist and anti-government, essentially saying government should be stripped back to the military in order to go forward with that, the truth that they tell. And then on the left, and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it's the opposite, addressing child poverty, addressing the discrimination against minorities, addressing working people's concerns. To some degree, yes, she does that. Supporting right to organize, she does this. So she should get positive marks for that. But it's always linked to these other things. And for me, I mean, we all have our different views, but for me, if you embraced and you put all your money and all your support and all your political capital into pushing the COVID reign of terror, and you haven't come back and said, I was wrong, this was a crime, then this is totally unforgivable for me. Now, the fact that 99% or 95% of the people in Congress are guilty of the same crime as her, I could care less. The way we get back to decent, safe, healthy politics is by taking a stand on real issues. And this, I think, she has completely failed to do. And she has a certain, she did this also on the gender issue, right? We had a whole campaign in the United States, which I think was probably run basically through Homeland Security, to use gender ambiguity as a tool to disorient and confuse young people and to create political chaos in the United States. Men going into women's bathrooms, men playing women's sports, etc. It was a classic operation. And these progressives bought into this. they promoted something which was really horrible. And they have not come back and said, actually, that was a mistake. And still, to this day, there are progressives who say lots of things that I embrace, that I fully support. But they start their sentence by saying, oh, we have to stop this discrimination against trans. It's like the first thing they say out of the gate. And trans is it's an ambiguous term, and it was sort of created as a political. I mean, there's documentation on this. I don't want to get into the details of it, but this has totally discredited the left. There could be a healthy left, and I would say on the trans issue, if you went back to the left, to the traditional socialists, or for the Marxist, or for that matter, to Lenin and Mao Zedong or whatever, none of those traditional left were for gay marriage. None of them were for trans rights. None of them, Mao or people like that were saying we should have healthy, families. There was none. There was considered to be decadence to promote this sort of culture. Now, I think we should be tolerant. It's none of my business what other people do in their spare time. But the promotion of it was really something grotesque. And I find that with these three people that we've mentioned is also a tremendous liability.
It sure is. What about her foreign policy of sort of being in the Israeli camp, out of the Israeli camp, AOC?
Right.
I think that she was in support of the Iron Dome or the latest version of that recently. She's in with it. She's out of it. We don't.
It's really confusing. I mean, I don't pretend to. Although I could give a report on this if I prepared for it. But my understanding is that she's for and against different bills related to funding the Israeli military, and she uses this distinction that certain weapons are defensive and some are offensive. So she's against those which are offensive, but those that are defensive are okay. I think that's more or less what she argues, which is totally meaningless. And so I think she was, she was started by two Israeli, she was launched by two Israeli startup companies, and she has this relationship. It's not unlike other politicians in Washington, D.C. So I want to make this clear. It's not that I'm singling out her. If she took the position that she was just another, sell your soul politician like everybody else, then fine. Doesn't bother me at all. It's that she takes this position that she's holier than thou, that she's pure, that she's standing up for the working people, that she's opposed to genocide the persecution of the Palestinian people, et cetera, that she takes that stance, that rhetoric. This is the part which is so offensive.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Another politician, Chuck Schumer, just a few days ago, responded to Speaker Mike Johnson.
Yes.
Mike Johnson said that they would hold off on a vote whether to release Epstein's files or not until the fall.
Right.
And then Chuck Schumer said that he had found something called the Rule of Five, which allows 5 senators who are on the, I think, Homeland Security Committee, that those 5 senators can come together and order or compel the Justice Department to release the Epstein documents. So he said that they have until August 15th. Emanuel, what do you say about Chuck Schumer waking himself up, dusting off his crypt, and going before? It sounds to me like he can smell blood on this one, and he's taking a while to pick up momentum. But he certainly did get the ball rolling very quickly. He got 5 senators to come forward. Is it all a big show? Does he mean it? What's going on with Schumer bringing this forward for the Epstein files?
Right. Well, I mean, Schumer is in another class from AOC. He is right there, ground zero in Washington D.C., and he would, I think, make any deal necessary to satisfy his clients. So the specific thing would be about. It seemed like he found an obscure law or precedent that he's now using to get a little bit of traction. How much traction
it hasn't been used in 100 years.
Yeah, it's that sort of thing. I mean, and Trump also has used this approach, as you know, under Dodge, all sorts of things that haven't been done for the Alien Sedition Act, for example. Things you don't normally do. The bottom line for Schumer is that with the radical efforts to completely redo voting districts and voting and voter ID, et cetera, across the country, that we're looking at a possible situation in which the Republicans under MAGA have fixed the elections, for the foreseeable future, that Democrats are never going to get a majority in anything. And so Schumer is going to see these lobbyists every day. That's why he spends most of his time with lobbyists and representatives of different corporate and billionaire clients. And they're saying to him, hey, Schumer, the MAGA people, the Republicans, they got a lock on this election crap. Why should we waste any of our money on Democrats? You guys are history. You're going to be a permanent minority. And so he's trying to get some sort of momentum to convince these lobbyists that no, Democrats are going to come up with this Epstein file. They're going to, Trump is going to have mud all over his face. Maybe he's going to have to step down, and the Democrats will be back in town. We'll win the midterm elections. And so you should throw, a couple, $100 million our way for the next election, because if we don't get that sort of money, Democrats are finished.
What about the American Party, Emanuel?
So who is Elon Musk? I'm not totally sure myself. He's a very narcissistic, and he's always out there, even though he's one of the most inarticulate people I've ever seen on TV. Trump is more articulate than Elon Musk, and yet Musk is marketed as a genius. So this raises a lot of red flags for me. He seems more as like the face for a group of billionaires who want to be anonymous, which is not to say that Elon Musk doesn't have any money, but I don't think he's quite the player he appears to be in the media. The project that he's involved in, and it builds upon the Project 2025 from Heritage, which was basically the blueprint, is to basically take apart constitutional government in the United States. And Dodge, which Musk was supposedly in charge of, was ground zero for this operation. And he was largely successful, swooping in. I mean, basically, we are looking at a hostile takeover of the entire federal government by a corporation or a group of corporations. And it follows the sort of barbarians at the gate, traditional hostile takeover. You take over a company, hostile bid. You get in there, you fire everybody who has any competence or ability. You sell off all the assets which have any value. You strip the factories of everything you can sell off. And then after a year or two, you run away and leave behind the discarded ruins of what was once an important corporation. And so that is basically the working model. So we saw what he did with the federal government. He did profound damage. How well we can recover, I'm not a fortune teller, I don't know. But my guess is that floating this American Party is part of an effort to do a similar number on the political system in the United States as well, to go beyond simply fixing an election every here and there, to basically demolishing the entire system, from how we get information about candidates, how policy is discussed, how we vote, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's based upon an assessment, a very clear, cold-hearted, detached assessment of the United States, that institutions of the United States have weakened to the degree that it's possible to come in and basically shut the whole country down. And the model for what the United States will be like in the future, once the Department of Education is abolished, once all health services are destroyed, once all the money flows into the military and into the police and Homeland Security and ICE, is that American workers are going to be like workers in Thailand, workers in Malaysia, workers in Shenzhen. They're going to be worked to death. They're going to have no benefits, and they're going to be abused with no constitutional other benefits or protections. And that's the model, is to take the United States down to that same level of these other countries in which all these multinational corporations are running their factories. And so ultimately the goal is to take these exceptions, the United States, Germany, Norway, Australia, etc., and tear down all those walls towards this globalization goal, so that we're all basically in the rat race, or you would say the mouse race.
Okay, hold on a moment, Emanuel Pastreich. You're not buying into Elon going in with big balls and a bunch of forensic auditors and finding out that some of our biggest U.S. government institutions were nothing more than billion-dollar slush funds for friends of members of Congress, and that by cutting the bloated fraud, waste, fraud, and abuse, that somehow this was going to create more liberty and a free market right here in the United States? Why aren't you buying into that?
Well, to be honest with you, Ian, I do buy into that to a certain degree. That is to say that it would not be possible for someone like Elon Musk, with his bogus Dodge, a corporate consulting company in drag, pretending to be a part of the government, that you could not possibly have pulled this off if you hadn't already deep structural corruption and rot in the federal government. That if the federal government, if the whole public servant, the Congress and the White House, the federal government, the different branches were healthy, if they followed the law and the Constitution, if they were not deeply corrupted, they would have shut down Elon Musk's effort in a couple of days through the courts and through process within each department and within the Congress itself. So this could not, in other words, Dodge could not possibly have been pulled off 20 years ago. I don't think it could have been pulled off 10 years ago. It's a product of deep corruption. So yes, much of what he identified was real corruption. However, it was selective corruption. It's like the whole thing with the, Obama and the Russiagate, right? So it is absolutely true that the Obama group, or Biden group, exaggerated Trump's ties to Russia as part of a political maneuver. Was it true that Trump had no
to put him
ties?
in jail for life, potentially?
Potentially. Now, was it a fiction that Trump was tied to organized crime in Russia? No, that was 100% true. It's been proven through books and other research. But the particular narrative that the Obama-Biden people made up was a fiction. It was a fiction. And that I think they intentionally.
You mean they would have been better off just embellishing something that was true?
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying this without doing proper due diligence, so you'll forgive me for indulge me. I think that Trump could have been impeached for illegal activities involving Russia if they had gone after the real activities, and that they intentionally focused on secondary, unimportant things. But that Russia was not the key player. It really was not that important. But it's not zero, obviously. It's not zero. And there's a nexus between Russia, Turkey, Israel, and the United States, to some degree Germany, which is most people don't really know about. And I think if I won't pretend that I know it well, but my guess is that if I described it to you in some detail, that most people listening would have no idea what I'm talking about. There's a whole other world out there of deep, deep institutional corruption between nations, involving multinational investment banks, private equity, and multinational corporations.
And that world just keeps on moving right along and achieving all its goals and meeting the agenda.
Right on schedule.
Right on schedule. Right.
So, I mean, for my advice on Trump would be, I mean, and I'm not the first person to say this, is pay no attention to what he says. Watch what they do. Just watch what they do.
Did a little bit of the myth get shattered after he became president and we didn't see any end to the Ukraine war months later?
Right. Well, the Ukraine war, I mean, presidents, I don't know how to answer that question. There's an immense concentration of power taking place using Trump as an instrument, and it's a concentration of power basically through outsourcing of functions of the federal government to a small number of companies, corporations, both military and not military. Ukraine, I think the Trump people, there's a whole group, including people in the Pentagon who were, now I'm blanking out, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Elbridge Colby. So his position, Asia First, was, and this is not unique in the Trump administration, United States should draw down its commitments in Europe and around the world and focus everything on Asia, specifically preparing for a war with China, which they're guessing is a couple of years in the future. I mean, more literally saying stuff like that. So yes, there's no doubt that the people around Trump wanted to draw down Ukraine and to get those resources to Asia and to change the geopolitical strategy.
Yeah, but if they lose yes.
However, the money to be made in Ukraine and Germany's role in this and NATO's role, et cetera, is not so simple. And there's a lot of very powerful people. I'm not talking about Bernie Sanders powerful people. I mean, I'm talking about really powerful people for whom the war in Ukraine is like no compromise. There's no drawing back. I mean, I don't think you would want to get in a fight with these people in a dark alley. And so I think the Trump people met their match on Ukraine. That as powerful as they are in, wiping out bureaucrats who are doing work on environmental pollution or emissions or financial regulation, these totally harmless but essential people who actually keep the United States following the rule of law. Those people, you can send Elon Musk in and they're gone. It's very easy to do. It's tragic, but it's easy to do. At the rate we're going, we're not going to be able to do any of these things. So in the long term, the United States may very well have no presence or no impact in Ukraine or in Europe or in East Asia further out. And as Olaf, it's Sergei Olaf, the author of Reimagining Collapse, who was grew up in the Soviet Union, immigrated to the United States, and when he went to college here, he discovered that the United States was following basically all the same patterns as the late Soviet Union. So in the late Soviet Union, if we're looking like 85, 86, 87, as it was starting to fall apart, it was expansive. It was growing. It was, going into Afghanistan. It was like, cracking down in Eastern Europe, et cetera, et cetera. So the collapsing Soviet Union did not look like it was something which was about to shrivel up it looked like it was expanding. And this, in some ways, I think resembles the Soviet Union, the classic with a sun, right, a star, which is the red giant white dwarf process. So when a sun reaches a certain age, the core starts to disintegrate, loses integrity. The result of the disintegrating core is that the star starts to expand outwards because the gravitational pull is not enough to contain all the gases. And so it expands out, embracing all the planets. In our case, it would be all the way out to Neptune. And then after a couple 100 million years, it starts to contract again and forms finally a white dwarf, a tiny little star. And that Soviet Union was similar. When it started to fall apart at the center, it became radically expansive. But that radical expansiveness then resulted in collapse, institutional collapse. And I would say, and this is what Olaf says in his book, Reimagining Collapse, that we're looking at something like that the United States, we have profound political culture, institutions, governance by the Constitution and by law, across the board. We're looking at massive institutional collapses. And the initial sort of manifestation of that collapse is this radical expansiveness. The United States is going to take on China. It's going to take on Russia. It's going to back Israel against Iran. I mean, just all over. I mean, with Rubio, we're going to take over all of South America, right? I mean, we're going to, be telling everybody in the whole world, what their tariff policies are going to be. Just a radical, and then we're going to use Google, Meta, Oracle, Palantir, et cetera, to take over the entire, the entire communications, take over all money, using low orbit satellites to control all communications in the world. And my guess is, based upon history for the last 8,000 years, it's not going to end in a pretty way. The first step is to identify and call things what they are, to name things by their proper names. That's the first step.